Hey, what's up, everybody? Alf here with a little GBL update for you, a little informational video. We're going to be talking about Johto Cup today, the last format here of this rotation, and some things that you probably want to be looking out for. It starts today, and it's going to be new, so to speak. It's something that some of us have played before. It's on our wheel of memes that I do with viewers, so it's something I have a little bit of experience with, not anything like what we're about to get. But I do think that there's a few strategies that you should be aware of, a few things to look out for, and we're going to talk about those. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. All right, we'll start with the basics. You probably have seen these three Pokemon looking like this before. Johto Cup, while a very powerful meta, is also a very limited meta. It's not many Pokemon available. And if you look at the top of the meta, there are three Pokemon, guess what, that all work great together, but also absolutely brick wall each other. So obviously Skarmory brick walls Meganium, Meganium brick walls Lantern, Lantern brick walls Skarmory. These three Pokemon are going to be available, and you're going to see these three Pokemon together in this team before. But if you run this team, I'm telling you, you're likely to find the format slightly frustrating, because it's going to come down a lot to whether or not you win the lead and whether or not you can claw out of that, because most of these Pokemon have no fighting chance against each other. Now, the nice thing is that especially in the Lantern slot, you have a lot of different options. There's a ton of water types available, and they all do something slightly different. Some of them, for example, have more play against Meganium. Some of them have more play against other members of the meta. Something like a Quagsire or an Azumarill, for example, gives you more play. So something to keep in mind, that these three Pokemon are going to be central to the entire meta, but I don't actually think just jamming these three Pokemon on a team together is going to create the best experience for you. You might win some games, and the more people are not playing the meta, the better this team looks. So these Pokemon are actually quite good at covering each other. They tend to do a great job of beating the other things they're counter. But if everyone's on this team, the team's gonna be miserable. So it's a good one to have in your back pocket. And if you're looking to attack the meta in a unique way, the best way to do it is to find something that beats two of these Pokemon. If you do that, I think you're going to have a pretty good and pretty interesting core breaker to play around with. So something, that's got a good matchup there is going to be something to look at. We'll look at some of that, but definitely want to be aware of these three Pokemon, want to be aware of what their matchups are, as I think you're going to see a ton of these, and sort of work around them. That there's one day one strategy that I think you might want to consider using. Or if you're not using it, you might want to consider being ready for it. And that strategy is right here. It's Quilfish, and it's Quilfish as a safe swap in the format. Bonus question time. What is the only reliable Quilfish counter if it's up? A poison jab. I'll give you a moment. There's basically only one. It's Quagsire. Quagsire is basically the only thing that can reliably beat a Quilfish on the swap. There's a few other Pokemon that have reasonable matchups. Skarmory is one of them. However, if you are a little bit slow on the swap, and I mean by a single fast move, you're gonna lose that fight. It's something you have to keep in mind, is that not only are the number of counters fairly limited for this swap in, so are the number, and that number goes down if you're slow on the swap in. So if in your first couple games you don't know what your Quilfish plan is and you wait an extra fast move, you're probably dead. Now there's a couple other things you can do that I think are actually interesting when it comes to neutralizing this option. So one, you can run a Quilfish on your team. I mean, you should be probably doing this day one anyway. Run the Quilfish and have the option of doing that. You can play the mirror. You can do all sorts of stuff there. You can run a Quagsire on your team. In the back, hidden, bait out the Quilfish swap and actually defeat it. The other thing you can do is you can actually tailor your lead to make Quilfish swap-ins not that appealing. So for example, running one of the Pokemon that have a generally favored matchup but can't beat it in the swap, a Skarmory or a Lugia, those Pokemon actually allow you to prevent your opponent from playing that strategy. So you can actually sort of hamper it before you even see it occur. So something to keep in mind. I do think on day one, you should probably be looking to either use this strategy or counter the strategy. It has one of those rare PV Poke 100 ratings in its role. It is essentially the perfect swap in Pokemon. There's very little that totally blows you out, and your matchups tend to get even better the more shields you invest. Nothing beats you if you invest 2 shields and they want to invest 1, and still only a handful of Pokemon beat you in the 2 shield as well as the 1 shield. If you are not aware of this, you need to be. This is the thing that I think will get you the most MMR, is either utilizing the strategy, countering the strategy, or some combination of both. Now, there are a couple oddball Pokemon. Johto is an interesting meta because of where it's positioned in the Pokemon sort of universe release schedule, which means that there's a few types that aren't particularly well represented, as well as a few types that have essentially only one representative. So we're going to take a look at some of those and talk about where they might fit in. All right, so some of those oddballs I wanted to shout out. There's one available charm user in this format. It's Gramble. Now, Gramble is one of the glacier of the available charm users. If you've ever used it, you know for a fact that it's pretty squishy. However, it does insane damage, especially if you have a shadow version. The downside is this meta is full of things that counter Gramble, and in particular, Skarmory being at the top of that meta makes it a little bit tricky to use. That said, anytime a charm user available, there's always the plan of trapping their counter, keeping shields, and running through teams, and Shadow Gramble is excellent at that. So it is something to keep in mind. It's also flexible in that you can run it with Snarl, and against something like an Umbreon, that's actually a pretty good move set. So wouldn't be surprised if you see them. Now, there are other dragon type move users in the meta, but Kingdra's the only dragon with Dragon Breath, traditional style. You've probably seen Kingdra before as a viable safe swap. It is a pretty powerful Pokemon, and technically it has very good 2 shield matchups. The other dragon user to keep in mind is Steelix, who uses Dragon Tail as a fast move with the steel typing. Now, there's not a ton of steel type Pokemon here as well, and Steelix is one of the few mons that is exceptionally good against Skarmory. If someone's safe swapping Skarmory, you see those. Steelix is one of the few mons that truly does blow it out. Now, Kingdra is very, very dependent frequently on getting an Octazooka debuff quickly and effectively, especially a shielded Octazooka debuff can flip a ton of matchups. Kingdra is a very good Pokemon, and ultimately would probably do very well here. But again, Skarmory is a bit of a problem for you considering the fact it resists those Dragon Breaths. Lastly, and through a quirk, this is an interesting revelation. So I put Galarian Slowbro here. There's not a ton of very good confusion users in the meta. There are a few Pokemon that learn it, including Celebi. There's the regular Slowking. This is Slowking, by the way. Galarian Slowking. Girafarig learns it. Giraffarig's got some interesting matchups too. It's not something you might not want to sleep on. But Galarian Slowking dunks on Quilfish. It resists it resists the poison stings. It has confusion damage. They're not going to be able to kill you before they die. But through a PV Poke quirk, it's ranked lowly enough that it doesn't display on its key matchups, and it actually doesn't display in the multi-battle for Johto Cup either. It's something you might have built, and it does have some interesting play. I think any of the confusion users, I'm sort of just now realizing as I was thinking about Quilfish quite a bit, that the confusion users are not really displaying in any meaningful way. So if you find a way to sneak in a Girafarig or a regular Slowking or Galarian Slowking, you can do some really good work. Now, I don't have a preference yet on which of them I think, if you are looking to run that, would be ideal. They don't have great matchups against the rest of the field. I will say this about Girafarig. It does have Thunderbolt, which can catch a Skarmory off guard if, say, their Skarmory lead into Quilfish safe swap and then you farm in Thunderbolt. That's actually not a bad play, where some of the other mons do not really have a great way of hitting, say, a Skarmory who comes back in to farm you. So something to keep in mind. But some interesting mons. One of the things that's kind of interesting about Johto Cup is that there are a bunch of mons that sort of fill these one-off niches, and you're not likely to see viable ABB teams. You can't really run double Dragon or double Charm in this format because there aren't 2 of them. There are some types that you can. Double grass, likely. Double water or triple water, I think we will definitely see. Double flying, something with like Skarmory and Jumpluff. Double counter especially, or triple counter, given that the counter users tend to be pretty good against Skarmory. They're better than you think. Little fun fact about Johto Cup. Most of the counter users beat Skarmory. And they definitely beat it with shield advantage or with time. So keep that in mind. Definitely don't sleep on the fact that Skarmory is not a brick wall against the fighters. In fact, most of the good flyers in this format, including Noctowl, take neutral damage from counter. So you have to be careful about that. But I do think that this is looking like an interesting format. I haven't even talked about a Pokemon like Azumarill. Can you imagine there being a format that has Azumarill in it and we haven't even discussed it? But the simple answer is that there's a lot of play here, and a lot of Pokemon have ways to play themselves out of their worst matchups. Umbreon and Azumarill is not a set matchup. It's not something where you automatically lose if you're Umbreon. Skarmory and Meganium kind of is, but there's plenty of places where you can find a way to do that. So if you're running something like Umbreon and Azu, you're going to find a way in and out of matchups pretty effectively depending on your movesets. So it's something to keep in mind. I'm curious what you'll be running in Johto Cup. I'll be streaming it today on my Twitch channel where I do most of my battles. So we'll have battles here on YouTube starting tomorrow. I do hope you'll come by and say hello. All that information is down in the description for this video. I appreciate those of you who hit that like button, who leave a comment, who've subscribed to the channel. We're close to another milestone. So if you haven't done that, I really appreciate if you do. But anyway, have a wonderful rest of your day. Good luck in Johto Cup when it drops, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.